Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today we're painting Peach's castle from Mario 64. This is the full version. If you're interested in the time-lapse, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. I was really inspired by my Misty Castle painting that I had done for Zelda's castle, and I thought it would be nice to do one for Peach too. So I kind of based the silhouette on the Mario 64 version of the castle, just because it's very iconic. It's in Mario Kart 64, and it's kind of basically the same thing. They just changed a few small things for the different games. But instead of the pine trees, I thought it would be nice to bring in more Mario-related background items. So I have some of the hills, I have the bubble trees from the overworld of Mario 64, and there's also a pipe kind of representing where you come up from the pipe in Mario 64 in relation to the castle. A little bit, it's a stretch, but it's there. So the first thing I want to do is bring in my sky colors. And I'm mixing up a light cyan, using cyan and white, and it's going to start at the top of my canvas and fade to an even lighter cyan as I get closer to the middle. And because some of this comes so far down, I might be best off drawing a line about 2/3 of the way down the canvas, just to make sure I cover everything and I don't have to worry about doing any touch-ups later. The next thing I should be working on is, of course, the castle, just because everything else in front of it does sit in front of it and it's easier to paint it if it's further away. So I'm going to use my T-square to find the very, very middle of my canvas and draw myself a line kind of in here so I can see where it falls on each side of the canvas. I'm also going to mark it in with chalk pastel and fill it in with a neutral gray number 5 color and fade it into white as it gets closer to the bottom. The trick for this is making sure it's the same on both sides. So that line I drew in the center is very important to figuring out how far apart things should be on this side, and they should be the same over here. For example, if I line my T-square up to the top part of this roof here, the center line should be right at 12 inches because this canvas is 24. So right here at 12 is my center point of my canvas. Then what I could do is I could count over and see where this line started from my rough sketch, which was right about 10.5 inches, which is 1.5 inches away from 12. So I could go another 1.5 inches this way to 13.5, and I knew that this side had to start there. I could also measure from here to here and figure out how long this was, and then count the same over here to figure out how far that should be. So that's kind of how I started to figure out to make things equal. And the last thing I have to do for the castle is put the flags on each part of the towers. So I cut myself a little template out of it to make sure it would be the same size, and I'm just going to trace it on each one of these. I had put some of that neutral gray on my palette and I thought it was just too dark, so I mixed up some more white in it, and I thought it was kind of just too warm of a gray, so then I mixed some of this blue that I still had into it. So I've made this kind of cooler, lighter neutral gray, and this is going to be my base for the castle. Now I will be fading it to white the closer it gets down, but because of my lines and trying to make sure everything stays within these boundaries of the chalk, I think it would be easiest just to paint the thing solid gray, and then use a transparent white to do a wash of white across the bottom. In order of distance, next comes this block, this bubble tree, and these rounded cylinder-shaped hills, but because I don't want to make them too big or too small or in the wrong spot, I really need to sketch a lot of this in until I'm happy with the placement, and then I can start painting. I'm working from back to front, like I always do, because acrylic does cover up quite nicely. And there's 3 things that kind of need to be in the furthest background but in front of the castle. And that's these blocks here, this single tree that's going to be here, and then these 3 rounded cylinder hills over here. So I'm starting on the left, and I'm just going to paint all of these, and I'm going to paint them completely with their value, with their detail, and then I'll move on to the tree and do the same thing, and then I'll move to these hills and do the same thing. And then by the time these are dry, I should be able to come back here and just do a little bit of the fading to white like I did the castle, where I take the transparent white glaze and kind of just paint along the bottom a little bit. It's not going to be as drastic as the castle, but I do want to have all of these fade a little bit lighter as they get further down towards the bottom of the canvas. Also, all of my colors that are far away here are going to be lighter and mixed with more white as I paint them, and then as they get closer, they'll get more and more saturated of the pure color. All of these trees are going to be done the same way. I'm going to kind of paint a sphere with my base layer of green I made, and then kind of use a lighter color for a highlight and a darker color for a shade. Now I'm doing that with each bubble that you can see. So once this one's dry, I'll do another bubble here and another one here, and then just the little ones you can see on the edges. One of the things I'm concerned about is all of my layers starting to blend together. Because there's going to be so much green, because it's all like land and foliage, it's going to kind of be hard to differentiate between all of those layers. So one of the things you can do is use atmospheric perspective to kind of give mist or fog in between all of the layers. Now I've already done that on the castle, and I still want to do that on these layers, but I'm going to be doing it a little bit different on these, and it's going to kind of be like I do my sky, where I have the 2 colors and blend them. It's just going to be like a smaller part of the canvas I'm doing that on. So my bottom color is going to be fluid acrylic in zinc white, which is a transparent white. That's the same white I used here on the castle. And then it's going to fade up into something different. It's going to fade up into acrylic glazing liquid, which is a mostly transparent liquid, and it looks kind of white, but it actually dries pretty clear. So I'm going to paint that up top here and blend that down into the zinc white so they fade together nicer, and it's a smoother of a transition, and it's not as opaque as just the solid zinc white. The next hills I want to work on are this one right here, and then there's one over here that goes off the canvas. This one right here sits in front of those two, so it needs to happen after that, but I've mixed up a new green that's different from all my other greens. It's less light, so there's less white in it, so it's more saturated. There is still some because I want the super saturated stuff to be this really close-up stuff. And I also want to talk about kind of where I'm pulling some of these things from. Like these blocks I pulled from Super Mario Bros. 3. Like these are in different games. They're in a lot of the games, but kind of like the spots and how they're treated with their texture is different based on which game you're looking at. And I already talked about how the trees are from Super Mario 64 when you first come up in the pipe in the outside part of the castle. So I am pulling different things from different Mario games, but they're the things that remind me of Mario when I think about it, so I thought it would be fun to kind of like piece things together and throw other things from different games in. as I'm painting these, I'm thinking about trying to balance out my colors. For example, in some of the newer Mario games, these rounded hills are bright colors, so I couldn't put the bright colors here because of the blocks are here, and there's no other bright colors over here. I kind of like the idea of keeping a bit more foliage and grass color by keeping them green instead of the bright colors. So I think with the blue-green here, the medium green here, and the yellow-green here, doing this more of a yellow-green would look good. But like I had said earlier, I'm trying to keep it more and more saturated the further forward I'm coming with it, with the foreground. So this will be a saturated version of these ones. But then I'm thinking if I do the dots on all of these things, this one should probably change, or there's going to be a lot of polka dots around. So in Super Mario Bros. 3 in the All-Stars version, there's diagonal lines in the hills. So I think on this one, I'm going to keep it more of a blue-green, but do those diagonal lines. And like I said, I am bringing different elements from different Mario games to this, and even though like I had originally planned to do it a bit more Mario 64, these items kind of make me think more of Mario than some of the things in 64 where it's just like generic trees and generic hills. For each of these bubbles, I'm painting them their solid shade first, and then using some phthalo green blue shade to do the shadow. And then I'm just taking this main color I have and mixing a little bit of white into it, and giving it a little bit of a highlight here, because all my lights are coming kind of from this right side. And then I'm just kind of blending this into the base color, and working it outwards, picking up some more of the base color, and then just blending it in. I'm using burnt sienna for the main part of the trunk and burnt umber for the shadow, and that's going to be the part that's closest to the tree spheres up here. And if you were going to see it, I probably used some of this lighter color I had for this peach block for my highlight. I'm shading these hills the same way I did these ones. So I have my base layer and I'm noticing it's a little bit transparent, like you can kind of see the line of this hill behind it, and I'm not super happy about that. So once I have one layer down, I'm putting a second layer on top, and then I'm doing a little bit with the value on the left with the shading, and that shade color is basically my base color with more blue, and then my highlight is my base color with some white and some yellow just to lighten it up a little bit. But I'm doing that with the second layer because the first layer is just kind of priming it, and the second layer is going to cover up any of those inconsistencies in the paint. And that's also the layer that I'm mixing in that value with. My trick for drawing these diagonal lines is to use a ruler. I've lined it up where I want it to go, and I drew on both sides of the ruler, and then you can remove it and eyeball where about halfway should be, and then you're going to line this up with that dot you made and try and make it equal between here in this line and here in this line. You can draw on this line and then on the other side of the ruler. And so there's some of my lines. And then I'm just going to move to this next line, draw on the bottom, move to the next line, and draw on the bottom. And I'm just going to work my way through the entire hill with that. I also drew my shading lines so I know where the shadow and the highlight are supposed to go. Just like the ones here on these guys, it's the same idea and the same sort of location, but because I have to do the stripes of the different colors, each stripe is going to have its own shadow color and its own highlight color, so I want to know where that is as I fill it in. So like if this one's going to be a dark one, I need to have the shadow here, a little bit of a lighter shadow here, my base color, and then a highlight over here. So I'm going to be doing that with each one, so I'm going to have a lot of colors mixed up on my palette. I've mixed up the color for just the darkest stripes, so I have this original color here on my palette that I did for my base layer, and then I have a very dark color that I added a little bit more blue and a little bit of red too, because red's opposite of blue on the color wheel. This one is the same thing but with less red, and it has more of the base color. And then this is the base color with some white and some yellow just to lighten it up for the highlight. So I'm going to start by taking my base layer and giving this another layer of it just to kind of fill it in, because some of it's a little bit transparent, showing the canvas through. And then I'm going to take my next darkest color and do this first shadow, and then my very darkest color and do the darkest shadow, and I'm also going to take my highlight and do the highlight over here. Now over here where I have just a little bit of the reflected light showing, I'm going to go back to this shade, the first darkest shade for that. I'm starting my lighter color for the stripes, and I'm just realizing that I think the whole thing is just too dark. So this color I think would make a good version for the dark stripes, so I'm just going over the dark stripes with the new color. I put a little bit of mist on this tree just to push it back from these hills a little bit, and this hill is going to be more of this color, just to kind of keep thinking about that balance. And this little bit of a hill over on this corner is going to be more of the yellow green just to balance it out over here. I accidentally painted both hills the same color, but that's okay just because I do the 2 coats of paint to make sure it covers well. That yellow-green can just function as my primer coat. So I'm painting the color it should be on top, and this will be the color that I also mix the value into. And just like this one, I'm going to use a little bit more blue to bring in a shadow and a little bit more white and yellow to bring in a highlight. The tree is the next thing I'm going to be working on. Now, the way the trees have been going, obviously because this one's further away it's lighter, and then this one is more saturated, and this one is going to be even more saturated, I'm just trying to keep that same color. So it's going to be kind of this regular green as opposed to the yellow green of this. And I'm still doing the same shading technique. This time it's just a lot bigger and over here in the corner. Once I'm happy with the shape, I can start to fill it in. Now I think it would be easiest if I do the bottom part first and the inside part, and then worry about like this side part and the top later. Just because of the way things are laid out, like if I'm doing this bottom part here and I accidentally paint above this chalk line, later when I'm doing this part, it's easier to make a nice smooth line with the paintbrush this way than it is to like try and fill in down here and do a shadow. On top of the base color, I drew in some lines to show where I want the value to be. For example, inside the pipe, I want it to look like it's getting darker as it's going in. So towards the bottom of this, it's going to be a bit darker of a green, which I'm using red inside of the green for because it's a complementary color. It'll kind of make it look darker. So that'll be down here. And then up here, it's just going to kind of be a nice gradient between different greens, lights, and darks, showing highlights and shadows. Because my light is kind of up here, like this part of the rim is going to be a little bit darker, or lighter, because the light's here. So it'll kind of fade darker going this way. And that's the same thing that's going to happen on the bottom of the pipe here, this vertical part. There's going to kind of be more of a shadow over here and more of a highlight over here. And I also have to think about the rim casting a shadow onto the base too. Now these two parts are the hardest part of the pipe to deal with, just because they're such weird shapes and they have weird things going on. The front part of the pipe here and the top part are going to be a lot easier to do. I decided to make this box a wing cap block, so I'm just using some cadmium red to fill in an inside square on both sides of it that you can see, and then once that dries, I'm going to take some titanium white and do an exclamation mark on top and also do the checkerboard pattern on the edges. I had planned to paint this block cadmium red, but once I started to fill it in, I thought about how it's far away and it should have the mist over it, and the red just really wasn't going to work because everything else is really kind of desaturated back there. So I mixed some titanium white into that cadmium red and just used that instead. Now I'm going to finish up this coin by starting to do the face with the star on it, and then the very lip of it on the side. And we're done! We have Peach's Castle from Mario 64. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a poster or a phone case or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmal.com. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.